So now it's time to present in details the main outcome of the Harmony project, the Harmony model shoot. And we have Dr. Athena Tsirimpa, the head of research of MobyX, to present the platform. Athena?
Thank you. Good morning, all. Okay. So, okay. How it is? Okay, yes. All right. Some of these, I will start with the key challenges that we identified through the co-creation activities and the discussions, the extensive discussions with cities, public authorities, and transport modelers on identifying what is exactly that we would like, what we need to solve. We already have a pretty clear idea from drafting and writing the proposal, but we wanted to ensure that we have captured everything. So we all know that the majority of medium and large-size cities, they already have simulation tools, transportation simulation models that have been developed to support them in the planning. However, there is a number of facts that creates some gaps that we would like, that we aimed with Harmony MS to resolve. First and foremost, we know that several of these cities may have different simulation models tackling different time horizons. So some of them may have strategic models, some tactical, some operational, some may have all of them. But the key problem is that there is no interaction across these different time horizons that these models actually captures. Secondly, we know that because of the different time horizons and the different effect that the policies that the city would like to implement has, there are multidimensional impacts that are not properly captured. And we already discussed about the importance of land use and spatial design and how this could potentially will affect the transport planning and the way that different modes will be offered, and obviously the daily operations and activities performed. Most of the simulation models covers network and traffic. That means that although we have models that captures demand, usually demand is more neglected. We do not have the emphasis that is needed on clearly understanding and modeling the human behavior, the traveler's behavior. In academics, in academia, actually, we have developed such models. They're much more advanced. However, it's much more difficult for cities to apply and be able to use them. And cities, often, this came from the discussions that although they have the models, they usually have used available funds on developing them, they are lacking the internal resources in actually to use them later on. So either they will go in a consulting to support them, or they will end up, several cities actually end up not using the model for developing the urban mobility plans, and they will wait for the next funding opportunity, develop a new model and update the data that they have available. So in this, as we've seen also from the previous session, the models in most of the cases are necessary, especially for medium and large cities, in order to develop the sustainable urban mobility plans. Something that we have not touched yet is that there is also a steadily growing requirement regarding the development of sustainable logistics plan. Which in essence means that acknowledging the importance of city logistics and the effect that logistics within the cities plays in the transportation system performance. So this figure actually presents the different planning tools that are available. We see at the beginning what we consider as the macroscopic, the strategic layer, which involves spatial and land use modeling. We then move on demand and activity or agent-based models that are really important, that cover the tactical and the mid-term, let's say, horizon. And then we have the network and operational models, or the operational layer, mostly related to daily operations and how they can affect. The problem, as you can see from this picture, is that currently, in most of the cities, these models, even if they exist, they are not interactive, they are not interrelated. While it's obvious that there is clear interrelations in the way that each of them may affect the decisions of the other layer. So this is something that we try to tackle. This is actually what Harmony MS conveys. It's developed an integrated platform where all these different models are actually connected, integrated together. We have the strategic model, spatial or land use model, actually provides input to the demand or activity-based model, and also vice versa, a behavior observed or an issue on the operational layer that may be something that is steadily observed will provide input back to the activity-based model on a change in the behavior that should be depicted there. And here we try to convey the key takeouts, the key areas where Harmony MS actually innovated. And we consider that it is a tool that can considerably assist planners, cities, modelers to further develop the modeling tools that we have available. So first and foremost, as I said, it's the interaction between the different models that a city may already have, or different or new components, modeling components that are considered necessary in order to tackle the new mobility services that are introduced, like connected and autonomous vehicle sharing schemes, different delivery methods, because another component that still is extensively neglected from models that cities has is the freight component. And this is something that you will listen a bit more about it later. This is something that we are really proud that we have integrated in Harmony MS. The freight component at the tactical layer and how it affects decision-making and the interaction with passengers. Also acknowledging that cities already have a number of models that have invested money, we didn't want to leave them aside. So a key component of Harmony MS is that it provides the ability to integrate, connect these models, to plug them into Harmony MS. So we have already successfully done this with AIMSAN, which is also a partner in this consortium, but we have done this with Sumo, and we are ready to connect also with Visum. So we captured the key models, the key simulation platforms that we now, at least European cities, are familiar with and have models developed. Let me see if I'm missing something. Also, to support city planners, we have what we call this visualization dashboard, but it's more than that. In Harmony MS, you can develop different scenarios, run different scenarios. We can calculate, based on the city specificities, specific key performance indicators. And what it was demanded by the cities is that they would like to be able to compare the outcomes of different scenarios, and even more, to compare their scenarios with other cities of similar size that they have used their platform. This is, again, a component that we are proud of. And we have also, last but not least, something that we consider really important. So we have the land use model, as we said, that it's quite neglected and involves the macroscopic, the strategic decisions. And then we have the first activity-based model in a format that focusing on modeling extensively the travel demand behavior of individuals and feeding the operational model, and then assisting on the information and the developing of KPIs for the transport performance. So a few more slides about how it looks like. So this is the design of the MS. As Maria mentioned at her opening speech, we used, in order to develop the design, we have extensive discussions with the potential users to conclude with a design that would be easy for them to use. And it has this, a key component of MS is that it has a really easy approach on the expectations on providing, inputting data and the outputs that you were expecting to receive. And some more details on how this is the modeling component, where you can introduce different models and then run them. This is how the tactical passenger simulator look like, where again, as you cannot see clearly, but there's pre-specified fields where you need to enter information or upload data, and will allow you to guide you on developing the model. And this is just an illustration from part of the visualization with findings, so just on the distribution from part of the demographic forecasting model. And I will conclude with the value added that we see that Harmony MS has for potential cities, authorities, and transport planners or transport modelers. First, the easiness of actually combining models that either you already have or you need to develop for the specific city. It is easily configurable, and it's not a black box, which was something that came especially from the transport modelers, that often in the commercial packages, they do not have the chance to modify modeling parameters or specifications, or they do not have the chance to add components that they consider that are missing. So this is something that we tackled. It has a really easy scenario building that, especially for someone that is not a transport modeler and it's a transport engineer or an economist working for an authority, to allow him to develop its own scenario in a simplistic way. Linkage, as we said, with existing commercial models, the visualizations with the comparisons, the KPIs and graphics, and the fact that we can have a better utilization of existing resources. So apart from Harmony MS, which pretty much it's what I described, we have also a lighter version. The lighter version is a version that is less data hungry, because again, this is something that came from the cities, how we can use or develop, apply part of these models without necessarily having to do an extensive data collection, and just utilize the resources that we currently have available from the data that we get to collect. These are the cities that the model suite has been applied, and as soon as you will actually see some results from the specific use cases that the model has been applied in some of them, and the key universities assisted us on this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Athena. And now we will see some examples of the Harmony metropolitan areas, how we applied the Harmony model suite. Our first application area is Rotterdam, and I would like to invite Michiel de Bock from Significance and TU Delft University.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria. Yes, I will speak about the use cases we have implemented for Rotterdam. And as Rotterdam is like a logistic hub for Northwestern Europe, we have focused mainly on the use cases in city logistics. So I will present to you the functionalities we have developed in the Harmony MS on the freight side. Let's see how it goes to the next slide. Yeah. Well, planning tools for city logistics, they are scarce, but they are highly needed because city logistics is a very dynamic field because of the developments in international trade, e-commerce development, different technologies like electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. Yeah, there's a lot of things happening in city logistics. Oh, wait. And on the other hand, also the policy objectives are much more ambitious, so we need to reach climate goals. And the project officer, Thiago, already in his introduction, he mentioned the SULPs, the Sustainable Urban Logistic Plans. So we also need to have policy support tools for logistical planning, but they are scarce. And in Harmony, we made a big improvement in that field. So in Rotterdam, we have studied 4 different city logistic use cases. One was the introduction of a zero emission zone. The other was crowd shipping, so where individual travelers, they also do parcel delivery. to get a more sustainable parcel delivery. We also study micro-hubs, also in combination with autonomous vehicles. Here you see a picture of one of the demonstrations that was done in Rotterdam with the autonomous Rosie robot. Sorry. And also we looked into the impacts of different spatial planning of logistic facilities and the impact on the emissions and the use of the networks. So this is a big variety of the types of city logistic use cases that exist and also have much different impacts, and we could all analyze them with the tactical freight simulator. So this short pitch, I cannot tell you about all the modeling details, but to give you a short flavor, in the tactical freight simulator, we have implemented an agent-based approach. We are working towards a new generation of models, and they are becoming more microscopic because it is understood if you want to represent demand well, you need to simulate the decisions at the level of individual agents because they are very heterogeneous, and in particular in city logistics, the decision-making that's taking place is very diverse. So you have small shops, you even have households ordering parcels, but you also have logistic service providers. So agent-based modeling is the way to go. It's also shipment-based, so we are not individual aggregate freight flows, but the decision-making at the level of individual shipments that has to be done, which is the actual level at which the decision-making takes place. So you can develop much better choice models for it. Yeah, and as Athena already mentioned in the Harmony MS architecture, it has a modular structure, so we have a different hierarchy of choices that are modeled either at the more long-term decisions and also daily decisions like the daily scheduling, and finally also network modeling. Well, then some results. These are illustrations of the 4 different use cases we have developed in the model. One was on the zero emission zones. A key finding that we found there, that indeed with a zero emission zone you can reduce completely the emissions in the city center of Rotterdam. But as a secondary impact, there will also be a lot of rerouting traffic. So freight traffic that normally passes through the zone, it has to go around the zone, sorry. And this also leads to secondary impacts that are not trivial and not expected in advance. So if a zero emission zone is to be introduced, it's important to also try to mitigate the secondary impacts on the road network around those zero emission zones. We also had an implementation of micro hubs where the delivery of parcels was split up. So the last yard was done either by cargo bikes or by light electric vehicles or by those autonomous vehicles. And we studied different scenarios here. So how are the micro hubs operated? Does each parcel carrier operate its own micro hub? Or do we have a shared system where the service providers collaborate? And we noticed that in particular this last dimension or this last business model that you implement for micro hubs is very important. So if the logistic service providers, if they collaborate and they use the same micro hubs, you can get much more efficient consolidation of the last yard parcel deliveries, which leads to the minimum number of vehicle kilometers in your city center. We also studied crowd shipping. A result we found here that, well, it's mainly dependent also on the assumptions that we made. But we noticed that the additional traffic that was generated by the occasional carriers, so a commuter that goes home, picks up a parcel, brings it to a neighbor, and then goes home, those initial kilometers, they outweigh the reduction of the actual parcel delivery by the conventional carriers, because they are already so efficient, and because of the high density of the deliveries that they do, it's important to be aware that we might also get more mobility or more vehicle movements if we introduce concepts like this. So you need to carefully define how do we organize crowd shipping in order to avoid too much extra mileage. And then finally, in the use case of land use planning, we also noticed significant effects, and mainly at the local level. You can imagine that if you plan your logistic facilities in highly dense urban areas or more rural areas, this will have huge impacts on your network. So this was a snapshot. of all the use cases we did in Rotterdam, mainly focusing on city logistics, and by this we have tried to advance the availability of planning tools for city logistics, and in particular for the evaluation of sustainable urban logistic plans. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michiel. Our second application is in the metropolitan area of Turin, and Francesca Fermi is going to present it.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Let's see. Okay. Turin was one of the urban areas where the HarmonyMS has been applied. And the focus has been mainly on the urban functional area of Turin, which includes not only the municipality of Turin, but 87 municipalities around it. The purpose of the modeling application was the focus on passenger mobility, integrating different modeling components at strategic, tactical, and operational level, as Athena explained before. And based on this comprehensive and integrated structure, selected use cases has been defined, focusing on different objectives and policies related to public transport investment, mobility as a service, remote working, and road vehicle access regulation. The core of the HarmonyMS application for Turin has been the design and development of an activity-based passenger model, which of course require detailed data collection in order to represent correctly households and individual mobility habits. To do so, during the Harmony project, a survey has been performed with the Moby app developed by one of the partners to support the modeling application, collect the data required, and enhance the modeling application with this data. Okay. Just to give you an overview of all the model that has been developed for the urban functional area in Turin, several modeling components have been developed at strategic level to describe socioeconomic and land use aspect of the area. Then the core related to the tactical level with the activity-based model, and the operational level with a network assignment model developed with the Visum software. Oh, sorry. How to go back? Okay. This complex structure integrated together in the HarmonyMS allowed to evaluate different aspects of the use cases tested with the HarmonyMS, ranging from, of course, mobility, passenger mobility, to environmental indicators resulting from the assignment of each mode to the network. The modular structure of the HarmonyMS allowed to test use cases with different templates, and therefore focusing more on long-term impacts or on daily decision of passengers. Sorry. Okay. Going a bit more in detail on the use cases applied with the HarmonyMS, these are some examples of what has been tested. The first one was focusing on land use development and new public transport infrastructure. On one hand, the relocation of some function was planned in the urban area related to offices, healthcare, or in university. On the other hand, some new public transport infrastructure were planned in terms of extension and building of a new metro line and the development of the metropolitan railway system. And this was our first scenario to be tested. On top of this, we also tested the impact of remote working and the changing of activity schedule, And we explored the impact of urban vehicle access regulation measures in terms of a limited traffic zone in the central area of Turin, combined with a traffic calming area extensively implemented in the Turin municipality and in the first belt municipalities. And we also simulated the application of a low emission zone in Turin and in total about 30 municipalities in the urban functional area. Of course, the goal of these use cases was to test the impact in terms of congestion reduction with respect to dependencies to car and the impact on the environment. To give you an idea of what we were able to derive from the application with the Harmony MS, we had results at several levels, having models at strategic, tactical, and operational level. Different key performance indicators could be analyzed. So first of all, accessibility of jobs and housing, especially for the first use case where relocation of function on the area were planned. Of course, impact on modal split. Looking at the changes with respect to the base year with the potential reduction of dependencies from car in the Turin municipality and in the rest of the urban functional area. Sorry. We had a look at the impact in terms of CO2 emissions resulting from the assignment of each mode to the network, and taking into account also, thanks to the modeling components related to vehicle stock evolution over time, we could evaluate the impact in terms of GHG emissions over time, and of course, impacts in terms of passenger demand with a reduction of car trips, especially in the last use cases where strong measures to reduce road access were implemented in Turin, especially with a strong reduction of 27%, and also in the rest of the urban functional area. This was just to give you an overview of what we were able to derive from the application in Turin of the Harmony MS. And I'll give the floor to Panos for some information on Oxfordshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. And the last one is the application of the operational simulator of the Harmony MS and the adapters that we have developed. And Panos Georgakis from the University of Wolverhampton will present this case.
Okay, hello everyone. So my presentation is about the operational layer of the Harmony MS. So just to give you a quick overview of the different solutions and tools we developed and some examples of the use cases that the tools and the models were actually applied. So in terms of the Harmony architecture, the operational layer actually was sitting at the bottom. So we're trying to find what can we do, what kind of tools or what kind of models we can develop that do not exist. And effectively, we try to focus on new mobility concepts. So we try to develop tools that can sort of simulate passenger mobility concepts like share mobility, mobility as a service, and also on the logistics side to simulate concepts like cargo bikes for last mile logistics, for example, and at the same time see how can integrate new vehicle technologies like autonomous vehicles, try scenarios for electrification and so on. The way we try to sort of address this came up with some new concepts and some new requirements that we identify at the early stage of the project was first of all to somehow simulate this agent-based demand. So, of course, we used the demand that was coming from the tactical layer, and we had to find a way to actually simulate that into a mesoscopic or microscopic environment. We also had to somehow model the complex interactions of different operators. Some of those concepts, mobility as a service, cooperative last-mile logistics, they require different operators that they have to collaborate together. So we needed to somehow capture these interactions and be able to facilitate these interactions. And also create or extend, let's say, the functionality of some of the existing, let's say, supply simulators to accommodate things like drones and autonomous vehicles. So this is a very sort of quick snapshot of what we try to achieve at the operational level. In terms of the sort of individual models, again, the main functionality was to offer within-day operational simulators. As I mentioned before, mesoscopic or microscopic, introduce new services or the capability to simulate new services for both passenger and freight. So the controllers we developed for the passenger case was or allowed the simulation of mobility as a service concepts, or demand responsive transit. For the freight controller was sort of scheduling models for last mile logistics and models that will allow the dynamic rescheduling of fleet, for example, again, taking into account what happens at the very macroscopic level. We also develop models for energy and emissions, and also to output results related to noise. In terms of the implementation considerations, again, we have to take into account this sort of agent-based approach and look at some new, let's say, ways of how demand is defined and how we can actually accommodate this in the operational level, and also have some sort of a software agnostic integration. So the idea was that the supply simulator could actually be swapped between different solutions. So that was also a consideration that we had to take into account as part of the development. In terms of the use cases that we implemented at the operational level, so the use cases and the way we actually had to deal with them actually trickled down from the higher layers, because we sort of facilitated the tools that we developed to sort of simulate the demand that was coming to us from the tactical layer. So the use cases were very sort of aligned with the use cases that happen at the strategic and tactical layer. So in terms of the Oxfordshire, we tested demand responsive transportation. You can see here at the top the different models that we actually used in terms of the microsimulation models. For the Rotterdam case, we evaluated the use of cargo bikes for last mile logistics. In Turin, we looked at the low emission zones and how the expansion of low emission zones can have an impact on environmental indicators. And in the case of Athens, we sort of tested the impact of public transport electrification combined with some micro-mobility interventions. And also, we also tested the impact of autonomous vehicles and how the different penetration levels of autonomous vehicles may impact the supply side. And of course, through the tools, we were able to actually generate different KPIs. So, for example, and some of them are quite self-explanatory. For the demand-responsive transit, that actually resulted to less vehicles on the network, which of course improved congestion and effectively had an impact in terms of emissions. The same thing with last-mile logistics. Some of the demand was actually accommodated by cargo bikes instead of motorized vehicles, so that had an impact on the performance of the network and also on the emissions. We tested extensively the emission models in the cases of Turin, like also Francesca mentioned, and of course this sort of extension of the low emission zones demonstrated a significant reduction of different pollutants. And in the case of Athens, the electrification of the public transport lines combined with the micromobility intervention had significant reduction on different kinds of pollutants. What we were able to do at the operational level, we could actually have very sort of detailed representation of those KPIs, so we could actually generate different KPIs at a very low level when it comes to the network, like to different sections or different intersections. So we had this sort of capability of the tools developed. And that's the end of my presentation. It's a very quick presentation of what we did at the operational level and the different use cases we implemented.